everyone. Welcome to Advanced Monday Afternoon live stream. I'm your host, Peter, and we're joined this week by Maria. Hello, Maria.
Hello, everyone. I am glad to be here to be talking about books. I love to read books, though I know that we don't always have a whole lot of time to read books.
Yes, in this day and age, most of the reading we do probably is on social media or somewhere online. We look at a newspaper or magazine, but every now and then it's great to find time to read an actual bound book of some sort. We did, you may recall, a unit on talking about books in August of 2024. So that one is still on the YouTube channel. If you want to look it up, find some other words about talking about books there. Today, this is Talking About Books Part 2. So we're also very glad to have Maria with us. I believe this is her Monday Advanced live stream debut, is it not? Yeah.
I think it is. Well, I'm glad to be here too.
Great to have you with us. As always, we are pivoting off of an article in your trusty Advanced magazine here for the month of December. And the article this week is in the parenting article. It's two separate articles. One called Good Gift Management, and the one we're pivoting off of is called Pediatricians Recommend the Best Gift of All, which is reading a book with your child, with your young child. So you want to read that article. Got us thinking about books, so we said let's talk about books again. As always, let's start off with our poll question. And Maria, what is our poll question this week?
Well, our question for you is, what kind of book is your favorite? So remember, answer us with this question. Answer the question about which kind of book you like to read. There are many different kinds.
Yes. Fiction, humanities and society, business and finance, science and technology. Now, of course, that's not every kind of book that exists out there, but from these four basic categories, what's your favorite kind of book? Fiction, humanities, and society. That's like philosophy, psychology, poetry, business and finance, pretty straightforward, and science and technology, pretty straightforward too. So of those four categories, what's your favorite? Maria, what is your favorite?
Well, I feel like it really depends on if I'm feeling like I want to learn something new, or if I just want to read something entertaining. If it is to read something entertaining, then of course I like fiction. And so fiction, they aren't true stories. Some fiction books can be very different from real life, and some can be similar to our everyday life. I like those kind of fiction books.
The fiction books that are similar to everyday life. So probably not science fiction, not fantasy stuff. You like sort of, that could have happened to me kind of stories.
Yes, or that could have happened to someone in another place of the world. But I like books that are more realistic.
Great. Y87921473, hello. I always hit the books. Good. You've anticipated some idioms about books that we're going to share with you guys later. So thanks to hit the books, meaning to study, usually in a school setting. Time to hit the books, got to prepare for a test, got to write a paper. And Steve, always good to see you, Steve. Almost finished your Christmas shopping list this Sunday. Celebrate with your family and friends and cherish the past year 2025. Great, Steve. Think about any good books that you read in 2025. Share those with us as well. And that goes for everyone, not just Steve. For me, the poll question, my favorite kind of book from this list, I'd probably say fiction. I like reading the humanities and society. I like reading business and finance. Sometimes it's not my forte. It's not my special passion. Science and technology too. But if I had to choose, I tend to read those kinds of subjects more online nowadays. I'll find a good magazine article or a long Facebook post about business, about science and technology or philosophy, and I'll usually read it there. When I reach for a book nowadays, it tends to be fiction. So I'm going to say, my favorite book from this list is fiction. Let's give you guys an early result on how y'all are responding to the poll question. What does it look like here?
Oh, it looks like fiction and science and technology is pretty much the same.
Yeah, about 33% of you like fiction or science and tech, and then we've got about a quarter of you for humanities and society. and just about 8% of you for business and finance. So a nice spread. Yeah, basically. Obviously, there's going to be some favorites, but no 0% answers yet. So nice to see that y'all have a nice diversity of book enjoyment. But as always, you come to the live stream for vocab, so let's give you some vocab about talking about books. So when you talk about books, here's a word you always want to know. Protagonist. 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 Maria.
Well, you probably won't see that word in the book you're reading, but every book has a protagonist, and they are the leading character, the main character in the book. And the protagonist is also the person that we're rooting for. If they are facing hardship, then we want to see them overcome that hardship.
Exactly. And so with the protagonist, now we're talking about fiction here. Sometimes in talking about a non-fiction book, somebody will say so-and-so is the protagonist of that book. And, that's applicable too. But more often when you use the word protagonist, you're talking about a fiction book. And that means you're also probably going to use another word, antagonist, antagonist, antagonist. Maria?
So we said protagonist is the character we're rooting for, and the antagonist is the character that is opposing the protagonist. So they're probably going against them. Usually they're what we call a villain or the bad person in the story.
Right. And sometimes, Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes the antagonist in a book, in a story, is not necessarily a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be
the scenario, a situation. It could be maybe even a storm if the entirety of the book is on a ship, for example.
Right. The antagonist could be nature. Perhaps it's a story about someone in the wilderness, and the wilderness itself, like the desert or a high mountain peak, is the antagonist that creates the challenge for the protagonist to overcome. Sometimes the antagonist in some books will be a certain societal tradition or a cultural norm of some sort that the protagonist finds themselves pushing against in some way. So there's lots of ways that protagonist and antagonist can appear in a book, but that's the basic idea, is the protagonist is the one we're rooting for and sort of the one from whose perspective the story is told, and the antagonist is whatever or whoever is against them.
That's right. So they're kind of going against each other, but also at the same time, the antagonist this person or thing doesn't always have to be evil.
Right.
It can often help the protagonist grow or make you root for the protagonist even more.
Right. Good point. The antagonist is not necessarily evil. Often it is, but not necessarily. It's just who or whatever opposes the protagonist. Here's another good word. And again, this is particularly for fiction writing. Exposition. exposition. Exposition, Maria.
So that is the beginning of the story where it shows you what the setting is. It tells you a little bit about the characters. Maybe it begins with this character is a prince, or this character is someone who wants to become a hero. So you kind of learn about where the setting is, who the people are, and it helps you get into the story.
Right. And exposition is often the way you can tell a good book from a bad book or a less good book, is because how the author will handle the exposition. Because the simple thing is just to say, this is where you are, this is what it's like, blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't really engage you. It just sort of gives you this information dump of the setting of the story you're about to read. A skillful author will give you that information at the same time he or she is telling the story, or through dialogue between the characters. So when you're talking about books, when you're talking about fiction in particular, the way the author handles the exposition, because all books need to let you know the setting. They all need to let you know the basic setup, but how the author relates that information to you is often a way to recognize the skill of the author, and it's often what will make for a good book.
Yes, and usually people, if they read the exposition and it's not done in an extremely well way, Or maybe if it's not something you want to read, then usually they won't continue the book. So this beginning part of the book is very important.
Right, because you got to let people know where they are. So the exposition will usually come in the front part of the book, right at the beginning, but without making it seem like, here's the exposition. We will now stop the story for the exposition. No. You want to see if the author can organically weave it into the story as he's telling it. Comment from Steve. There's a book Steve read called Star Wars Jedi Academy. Ah, yes, so many books based on the Star Wars movies out there. So many school experiences that the main character faces. You suggest this book because there's so many drawings and it's fun. That's right. Steve likes to do drawings himself. He's an artist who was telling us about drawing his comic books, and now he's recommending another book, Star Wars Jedi Academy. Thanks for the recommendation, Steve.
Yes, thank you so much. And when we talk about the word exposition, I will think of a diagram. Maybe you already know about this diagram. Exposition is where it talks about the beginning of the book and kind of tells you about the characters. And then for every story, there's a rising action where it kind of gets you into the story. It gets more exciting. And then there's the climax, which is the most exciting point of the story. Then there's a falling action in this diagram. And last of all, there's the conclusion.
Right. If you've ever taken an English class or a literature class, you've probably been shown a diagram, something like that. Rising action, the story is told, gets more and more exciting, climax, and then falling action as the new reality settles and the fallout from the climax happens. In fact, here's a sort of a related word, good word to know. You might know it already, but we're going to try it on you anyway. Spoiler. S-P-O-I-L-E-R, spoiler. Maria, what are we talking about?
Well, okay, this word can be used in different ways, but spoiler can mean it kind of gives away the ending of the story. So if you've heard of the phrase spoiler alert, it means, hey, we're about to give away the ending of a book or a movie. So spoiler is where it kind of says how the story will end.
Right, because you got that rising action and you got the climax, but the pleasure of reading a book, of course, is to discover that as you read it, not to just learn what happens before you've read the book. At least I think so. A lot of people, Maria, it's true, do like to know the whole story before they read it, the whole movie before they see it. So it's a matter of opinion. It's a matter of, just your personal preference. But I personally always like to not know about a story before I see it. Just, I'm tricky. I'm a tricky customer. You got to tell me enough to get me interested to read the book or to see the movie, but not so much that I know what's going to happen from beginning to end. Do you like spoilers, Maria?
Sometimes it depends. For a spoiler for a book, no. For a movie, maybe yes.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, spoiler alert. You'll see that in reviews of movies or reviews of books, meaning don't read any further if you don't want to know how it ends or if you don't want to know this important twist in the story that is worth talking about after you've read the book, but maybe not before it. Spoiler.
Well, you said you don't like spoilers, but you like to know a little bit about the story before you start reading it.
Right.
Then is what you need a blurb?
Yes. Excellent transition to our next vocab word. Nice short little one, blurb. B-L-U-R-B. It's even fun to say, blurb. It's a blurb. Maria, what's a blurb?
Well, blurb, it just tells you a little bit about the story, the beginning of it, and it's usually for promotional purposes. Maybe it might come at the end of the book, like at the back cover of the book to kind of give you a little glimpse into what the story is about.
Right. You pick up a book, you look inside the front jacket or on the back, and there'll be these famous people or other authors who said something nice about the book to encourage you to buy it and to read it. Those are blurbs. That's the industry speak for it. But often you'll hear people who aren't in the industry just say casually, yeah, I picked up this book the other day. I was just browsing. There was a blurb on the back by this author I like, or the blurb said that it was set in my hometown, something like that. That's what they're talking about, those quotes, those micro reviews from people who've read the book, a blurb.
So if you don't like spoilers, keep an eye out for the blurbs.
Right, the blurbs might be your key into the book. Let's give you guys a discussion question here. We've had our poll question. Now let's have a straightforward discussion question. You can interact with us and let us know. Simply, we're talking about books, so Have you read any good books lately? And lately, that doesn't have to be last week or even this year. You can just tell us what's a good book you've read sometime in the past, how about this? Since the pandemic. What's a good book you've read since the pandemic? How about you, Marie?
Well, I read a book called The Kite Runner. If you're someone who opens a book and reads a touching story and you will cry very hard, then if you read that book, you'll probably want to have a big box of tissues with you. Well, that's a fictional book, so it's not a true story, but it is set in like a true setting. So I enjoyed reading that book. It was a very moving one.
The Kite Runner. Yeah, I've heard about that one. I should add it to my list. Steve, yes, he's read a book lately called Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I've heard of that one. I read that book when he was in high school. His inspirations were from that book, and you recommend that book. Great, Steve. Yeah, I have heard of that one. Young adult literature, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And I've heard good things about it. I haven't read it myself, but I've heard good things about it. A book I have read fairly recently. I don't know if you advanced readers, some of you might know about this other feature that we have in the magazine now, right at the front. It's called The Art of English. The Art of English. We take an excerpt of a passage from a classic of Western English language literature, and we just talk about it. We even film a video clip for it. You can find it on our YouTube channel, The Art of English. We do one each month. And as a result of that, I always try to read the book, if I haven't read it, that we're covering that month. And that means back in September of this year, I read a book called The Wind in the Willows. You ever read The Wind in the Willows?
I've not read it before, but I've definitely heard the book name before. It's a pretty famous one.
It's a
classic, right?
It's considered a classic, written in 1910, 1913, I think. So just over 100 years ago now. British author. The Wind in the Willows. It's about these animals who live by a river in the English countryside, and they just have these sort of light, gentle adventures. They go to a new neighborhood, they meet new other animals. All the animals can talk, and they all sort of live this sort of English middle-class lifestyle. They go for boat rides on the river, or they enjoy a nice meal around the fireplace in their homes. So they're not really actual animals. They're sort of anthropomorphized animals. Big long word there. Anthropomorphized just means like humans. They're animals who behave like humans. Lovely book, just so well written. Good for children too. Children will enjoy it because, talking animals always has a magical quality for children, but adults as well. It's not just a kiddie book. I really recommend it just as wonderful sort of appreciation of nature, the natural world. And it's got humor and just this wonderful writing, and it just kind of takes you into its world, and you enjoy spending time there. The Wind in the Willows.
Well, that's a great book recommendation, Peter. And here Stephen talks about books that have been made into movies. I know that is the case for many books. So if you don't have time to read a whole book, you can choose to watch a movie. And someone left a comment that says they have not read a book for 2 years. You're not alone, but they do plan to make it their New Year resolution in 2026 to start reading.
Good for you, love tiny babies. And good to see you again, always here on the live stream. Yes, if you haven't read a book lately, New Year's coming up. Now's the time to make that resolution, read a new book. And just like that, we are nearly out of time. So let's be sure, as always, we always want to get some idioms in before we go. So these are idioms related to books, of course. So oh yeah, this is a good one. This is a great idiom. Read between the lines. Read between the lines. Maria, what does it mean to read between the lines?
This means that someone does not say something, but based off of the context or what they said, you can guess what they mean. So for example, if someone says, "Oh, I didn't have lunch yet," then you can read between the lines and guess that they are hungry.
Right, and it's maybe a little odd sounding, because it comes from books. Here are the lines, in a book of poetry here. So to read between the lines. Well, what does that mean? There's nothing literally on the page between the lines. There's the line and then the next line. So what's between them? But it's sort of deliberately abstract in that way because it wants you to think differently. You want to read between the lines to see, like Maria was saying, what isn't obvious, what isn't right there on the surface, but is intended, kind of underneath the surface. Subtext. Text, sub underneath, text that is underneath the regular text. Subtext, read between the lines. What's the meaning that maybe the author is trying to convey without literally saying it? So a good idiom, you'll find it in a lot of ways. I was talking to Johnson about the project, and he seemed pretty happy about it. But if you read between the lines on that report, there's some problems with it. So
that's a good example.
Yeah, it's a useful idiom. Oh, and Steve, another book, Challenging Yourself With, Detective Conan, because you and your family love Sherlock Holmes book. Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of the Sherlock Holmes book. Detective Conan, I know, is another character based on that. And thanks for giving him a plug, Steve. I've heard of Detective Conan, haven't read any yet, but with your help, maybe I will. Okay, and yeah, so that's all we have time for today. But as we're walking out the door, we're going to throw you one more, and that is to be an open book. If someone is, in parentheses there, someone is an open book, what does that mean, Maria?
Means they have nothing to hide. They share everything. They tell everything. So that describes someone who's an open book.
Right. If someone is an open book, you don't have to read between the lines to understand them. That's the idea there. If they're an open book, you open them and that's what they mean, that's what they say, that's what they want. They're an open book. You don't have to read between the lines to figure out what they're saying. Thanks so much for joining us, folks. That is all the time we have for today, but we will be back next week, as always, same time, same channel, with another topic for you, another chance to practice your English. But for today, I'm Peter.
And I'm Maria.
And we are wishing you a good day. Now here is a poem from Walt Whitman.